Hello, welcome to my video today. This is what we are going to be making. A little tiny mouse. He's fairly solid. He's a tail well anchored, little ears well anchored. He has little button eyes, a little button nose, and whiskers. He consists of a body, which is done in stocking stitch. There's an increase at the end of every row, not the last stitch, but you'll see third last stitch, and there are decreases across the last few rows. This is the back of the mouse, this is the front, and these are markers for the ears, so that once he is sewn up, he's going to be sewn up that way, and the sewing up part will become the top of the mouse. He will be sewn up from the nose to the rump. Then he will be stuffed. An optional little rattle can be added. He'll be stuffed some more with a pencil. Then he will be closed. The tail will be added. Here's our tail. It's a crochet tail. And then the two little ears will be added. And finally, with some black yarn, we will add the little tiny eyes and the little tiny nose. The last thing to be done is the whiskers. The whiskers are made out of all the ends, so we do not cut them off. Once we've closed up something or sewn up something or added the ears or added the tails, we do not cut off the threads. We leave them aside, and when he's finished, we will pull all those threads with a darning needle through out the little hole where the whiskers are. There they are, nice and firm. Everything is firm. I like to cut long whiskers. They will fray with use and with time. If the final owner wants to cut the whiskers shorter, they can. Mice actually have very long whiskers. But depending on what its goal is, if it's for a little animal, they might like to play with the whiskers. So there we go. Let me go through the tools. So we need black yarn. That's not a tool. We need the color for the body and for the ears. I like the outside of the ears and the body to be the same color, simply because when I sew it closed, when I sew it on, you do not see the stitches where it's sewn on. And then I like the tail and the inner ears to be a contrasting color. They can be different colors or they can be the same. You can have fun with that. We need quality stuffing. I got this from the local hobby craft. I have pooled it once it came out the bag, so it's ready to be used. I have a little rattle. It's optional. I have a pencil with a rubber. That is to help me stuff the mouse, to really get into the corners. I have a ruler simply to help when cutting the threads, so to give you an idea of how long it is. I have a pair of scissors. I have a whole selection of darning needles and shinny needles, simply because I like to use different ones for different tasks. I have 2 crochet hooks. I have a 1.9 which is used to cast on, I'll show you how, as well as for the inside of the ears to make it really nice and tight. And I have a 2.5 for the outer edge of the ears. I also have 2 sock needles with lace tips for the body. These ones are 2.75, and I have a 2mm, and that is simply for the first row where I slip the single crochets off the hook and on to the needle. I adjust my needle size according to the thickness of the yarn. This is advertised as a double crochet, but it is a thick double crochet. If I use a thinner double crochet, I use thinner needles and the mouse will be much smaller. So please keep that in mind. These are just guidance needle sizes. Use whatever you have in conjunction with the yarn that you're using. It's a bit of a hit and miss. It also depends on your tension, because that'll also change what needle size you have. So I've made hundreds of these little guys, and as I said, some are very tiny. Also, depending on the kind of yarn you use, some yarn is quite springy to the knit, and other ones are stiff. This one has got no give, has no spring. And the one little thing is, the paler the body, the less likely you will see the stuffing that comes through. So sticking with pastels and colors like that, especially to start off with, is a good idea. If you don't want your coloring to come through, then use a smaller needle, make the stitches even tighter. But at the same time, you don't want to bend your needles by going too tight with your tension. And these are called Addi, A-D-D-I, and they are lace tipped sock needles. The needle actually has one side that is what you would call normal, and one side that is super pointy, that is laced. Now, some needles that are just sold simply as needles have a very pointy tip. So if you have those, they will work well. Some needles simply have blunt tips, and you might struggle a little bit to, and this is for the increase, you'll struggle a little bit when it comes to increasing, because I'll show you how I increase. But once again, it's up to you to try and find a tension that works. I also have a pair of pliers that have been covered with insulation tape, because sometimes when I'm pulling a darning needle through the body, because it's stuffed tight, I can have a bit of problems with my fingers. I just pinch it with this, got these from Poundland, pinch it with this and pull it out. So that's really helpful. As I said, some of my darning needles, well, darning needles are blunt and chenille needles are sharp. Once again, it's for you to see which ones you like, which ones you're comfortable with. I use the large one for threading the tail through, and I use smaller ones for doing the ears and the whiskers and the eyes. So let's get started. I'll put aside the things that I will not be needing right in the beginning, just to simply clear my workspace. I also have my little book where I have my patterns in. It's been about 1.5 years since I've done a mouse, so it's going to be it was a learning curve this morning, but I finished him and he's exactly like I remember. So I made another little body just to demonstrate, and I actually had a bunch of ears. So I have not made ears for a while, but they are quite straightforward, and I had the pattern, so I just went over that. So let's get started. We are going to start with the body. What I need to prepare are 2 pieces of yarn for the markers. You can use something that is almost the same color or something that's contrasting. I will use a contrasting color, but remember, if you're using, for instance, a white for the body and then you use this kind of color for the markers for the ears, when you pull it out, it might leave fibers, and then you'll have blue fibers in your mouse, and you might not like that. But for demonstration purposes, so it's best to use markers that are close in color, not identical, but close. But for demonstration purposes, I'm going to use a contrasting color. I'm cutting 2 lengths just to show you. I'm using this over here. You can cut them between 15 and 20 centimeters long. That's between about 6 and 8 inches. Now you have your markers, and they sound like a fussy thing to do, but they are such a help when it comes to placing the ears later on. We are now going to start with the nose, and I've tried all different ways. I've made hundreds of little mice, and I found this mixture of crochet and knitting and simply love it. So we're going to start with a magic circle. Now for a magic circle, we put the tail of the yarn to the front. You can make it fairly long, and we can use it later for a whisker. And we also need to have something to sew it up with. So just to give yourself an idea, choose 20 centimeters. Got your tail to the front. Now it's going to be confusing when I say tail and then we're working with a mouse. So if it's actually his mouse tail, I will say mouse tail. If I'm saying tail, it's a tail of yarn. So wrap around to the back of your hand, catch with your fingers. Now using the 1.9 millimeter hook, you go through the loop, you go around, and you basically are going to fetch the yarn. Now it's on your hook. You're going to go and fetch the yarn again, and you're going to pull it through. That is your first single crochet. You are now going to make 6 single crochets. You're going to go through the magic loop. You're going to go and fetch your yarn. You're going to bring it back, and you're going to go and fetch the yarn, and you're going to pull it through the loop that you've just had. 2. Try and keep it tight. That one is a bit loose. You're going to go and fetch the yarn again. 3. So you see you're going through the magic circle. And be careful that you don't catch any of these threads, because later on you can't close your magic circle. Go and fetch the yarn, bring it through the magic circle, and fetch the yarn again, and bring it through the single crochet. You are not working these single crochets off the hook, you're keeping them on. So you see now you've got 4. Now you're going to make 5. Now you're going to make 6. And now you're going to make number 7. So now I have 7 single crochets on my hook. I've specifically used this kind of hook so I can slide it to the back. If you don't have that luxury, you're going to have to slip one off at a time onto your needle. I'm lucky enough that I can just move them to the back. It did stretch them slightly, but that's fine. It's really here that I didn't want to have the gaping loops. Because when I close that magic circle later, not now, when I close that magic circle later, I want a nice tight little nose. So we're coming to the back. and I'm slipping it onto the 2mm needle. Just needs to be small enough that it gets in easily, and also gives you a little bit of space to work your other needle in. If you use the same size, it's quite tricky to actually work into these first stitches. So now you have that. You now need to prepare your needle for work. So you're going to turn it that way, just as you would when you're going to knit. And now we're no longer crocheting. You put your crochet hook aside for later when you make the ears. And now we're going to start knitting. We are going to do one row. So let me change the page. Okay. So I wrote this out quite neatly. Normally my patterns are far more short-handed. So let me just put that there in case you want to take a screenshot. Hang on, let me do that properly. Okay, there's the first page. If you want to take a screenshot and look at that. And now we're on page 2. Screenshot. Yeah, I've scratched out, but you can work it out. That's where it's just if you want to actually write it out in your own little book. You can also make notes as you go along. Put that back. So, row 1 is purl. Now because I have this nice sharp end here, which is called a lace tip, I can really get into those stitches, which is fantastic. Okay, let me just try and get into them. So that stitch is actually twisted the wrong way. Take them off, put them back on. There we go. And start with the first one. He's a bit messy. Don't know what I did when I slipped them off. You can use all your fingers, it doesn't matter. Oh, I see what I've done. I've twisted them back to front. So I'm just going to have to twist each one the right direction. We all purl in different ways, but we generally need the stitch to not be twisted, so I have to untwist them as I take it off, put it back on, and purl. I'm assuming you know how to knit, so I'm not teaching you today how to knit. It's not a lesson in knitting, it's just a little lesson on how to make a mouse. So whichever way you can get across the row. There we go. We've now purled all 7 stitches. We are going to start increasing. We increase every single row until there are 28 stitches. And on the way up, we add our markers. So that's basically it. You increase until you get 28 stitches, and on the way we add the markers. If you forget to add the markers, it's not the end of the world. You'll just have to kind of guess where the ears go. But sometimes we can have a tendency to put the ears far too far back. I like my ears to be super in the front. Gives it a nice big body. And as I said, I don't have to think then. It's just they are simply in place. The increase is the same for every row. You are going to be working across until the last 2 stitches. We pick up a stitch and we knit into it or purl into it. This is a knit row. So this is row 2. I'm going to knit 5, I'm going to increase 1, and I'm going to knit 2. If you're left-handed with your yarn, right-handed with your yarn, you just need to get across those 5 stitches. Now I use this finger here, as you'll note, because I'm making my stitches tight and my stitches are small, and I do not want to rely on the needle to move and hold the tension, because I don't want to bend these needles. I like them too much. So now I've made 5. Now this is how we increase. We pick up the loop that is created by the previous row, and it is underneath the stitch we've just knitted or purled. So this is a knit row. I'm going to go and pick up this guy here. He's at the back with my left hand needle. I go to the back, I fetch him, and I brought him forward. He's now sitting on my left hand needle, and I treat him as a stitch, and because I'm knitting and it's stocking stitch, I simply knit into him. And that is the increase. Little Mouse is going to have this pattern afterwards. This is where we sewed up Little Mouse. As you can see, there are all those stitches because we have 2 stitches at the end of the row after we've increased. And there you can see the increase. It makes this really cute little ridge. And then his body moves beautifully from that. I also like it so that he's got a high little tail. As I said, I've made hundreds of these little guys, and this is the one that I just love. And he bounces quite well because I really stuff him a lot. We are now on a purl row. The purl also has an increase, and it is pretty much the same way, except it's a purl row. So we're going to purl, in this case 6, because there's going to be the last 2. There are now 8 stitches on the there are now 8 stitches on here, so I have to purl 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. I'm going to be picking up the stitch from the previous row underneath the stitch I've just done. He's in the front because this is a purl row. I've picked him up, there's the loop, and now he's sitting on my left hand needle. I simply purl him and then I purl the last 2. Two, 4, 6, 8, 9. It was row 3. I am going to continue until I have done 13 stitches. And the next row will be a knit. As you can see, all the knit rows have even numbers, all the purl rows have uneven numbers at the end, tally. So 13 is a purl row, that is scratch and fiddle. The next row, which is for the ear markers, is going to be a knit. And that is what the ear marker is going to look like. Some crazy stuff happening on my camera, and hopefully it's not going to come through in the video. This is a different phone, an older phone, so I do not know what the quality is like. I know I made videos with it a long time ago, but since then I've been using a newer phone. So I'm going to continue in exactly the same way until I have 13 stitches. I have 2, 4, 6, 8, 9. I'll do it in real time, and I'm going to go quickly. I have done the rows necessary to get to 13, and now we're going to do the markers. Someone's come, so I'll come back to this later. So here we are back again, 12 seconds for you, 12 hours for me, and we were at the ear markers. It is a knit row. Double check that I have 13 stitches, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 13. I need to knit 1, put the marker in place, and knit 10. Knit 1, take one of the markers, put him in place, and knit 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Then I need to increase 1 and knit 1. So to increase, remember, I pick up a stitch from the back, I need to knit 1, and then place a marker and knit the last one. So basically the markers are virtually 1 stitch from the edge. I need to do 2 more rows. I see my pattern didn't actually specify how many I'm supposed to purl, but I basically got to purl all the way until I have 2 left. So I need to purl 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12. Yeah, I need to purl 12, increase 1, and then purl 2. Is that right? Yes. Purl 12, increase 1, purl 2, it'll give me 15. And here I have to, what's 15 minus 2 is 13. I have to purl, knit 13. Okay, that's better. So that's how I basically do my patterns. Scratch out a little bit here, add a bit there till it's tweaked. And I tweak them, tend to tweak them until I get the right mouse. But as I said, it's been about 1.5 years since I've made mice. So purl 12, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. You know what? I don't even think I did any mice after lockdown started. That literally means I haven't made any nice mice since 2019. Is that really possible? Yes, it is. The last 2 years have flown. Yes, it's now mid-January 2022. And now I need to knit 13, increase 1, and knit 2. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. I now have 2 left, so the increase is always between the last 2 and the ones before that. I can double check just to make sure. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16. The next row, the markers are going to lie between the 5th stitch on that side as well as the 5th stitch on the side. But because I'm going to increase one on here, for now when you look at it, it'll be 4, but then the increase will come in there, so it'll be 5. So you'll see the logic of that. I'm using this yarn here. It's the same thread because I'm going to be tying it off afterwards. So we're going to do purl 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. My little marker, literally lift it up with my thumb, put it in between, and continue the row. When I get to 4 before the end, I need to put my marker in. But those 4 will turn into 5 because I'm going to increase one. So I purl 2, and the increase is always 2 from the end. Pick up that stitch, purl it, purl the last 2, and there we go. As I said, it feels really fiddly doing the markers. If you want to skip it, do. But I just love the fact the markers are there for when I come to do the ears. Because this little body, once it gets stretched, it just becomes tricky. And when I wanted all my little mice to look the same, I found this little extra step made a big difference. I tried all different kinds of things. I tried to make a stitch back to, reverse stitch so that it would make a little bump. I tried all different things, and this really was the secret. So now what we need to do is we need to tie off this. If it was a bit longer, I could have made the kind of knot, put it like that. If it was quite a lot longer, I could have maybe have done this kind of knot, but it's a bit tricky. But this is fine. I make a knot because I don't want him as in the marker coming out, and that can very easily happen. So now they're in place, and later on, see, once he's sewn up, once I've put those ears in place, you'll see how that works. Now what I need to do is I need to continue increasing until I have 28 stitches on my needle. I am going to pause the video here, and we're going to meet up once we both have 28. It will be a knit row on the 28, so we're literally going to be finding ourselves confronted with the purl row. If you forget to increase here or there, don't panic. Just continue with your work unless you're meticulous and want to pull it out. Just do it on the next row. Your mouse will be a little bit longer because it just simply means that you'll have an extra row in there and your mouse will be a bit longer. But you do want to try and get to 28 stitches because the 28 stitches will give him, so if we had 30 stitches, he'd be even fatter. If you wanted a skinny mouse, you probably make 25 stitches. Sometimes I even used to go up to 32, and then you get like a really big bump, but then you have to decrease quite radically. So yeah, you can fiddle with the size of your mouse by how big you make him. And if he's 32, he'll be 4 rows extra, and he'll be a little bit longer. So I will see you on the row after number 28. After 28 stitches, not row 28, after 28 stitches. The 28 stitches have been made, and I'm now with a purl row, and we're going to decrease for the back end of the body. I'm going to purl one row without increase or decrease, and then I'm going to decrease. It's going to be over 6 rows. The purl rows have no decrease, so there's 3 rows, there'll be no decrease. That's the purl. So I'm purling first this row here, then there'll be another purl, another purl, and another purl, and then the decrease, row 1, row 3, row 5. So we're going to start with a row of purl, it's 28 stitches. This section goes very quickly because, as you can imagine, there's less stitches every row. I used to make a pile of little bodies while watching TV, and then I'd come into my little office space here and sew them up. Now I have a knit row. I have to knit 3 and then knit 2 together, knit 2 5 times. So knit 3, 1, 2, 3. As I said, I use this finger to bring my yarn back because I want to keep those stitches nice and tight. And knit 2 together, knit 2, 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 knit 2 together, knit 2. I now have 2, 4, 5 stitches left. It says I must knit 2 together and knit 3. So I knit 2 together and knit the final 3 stitches. Turn the work, purl the row, and so I'll find you at the end of that. So you have just purled the row. I could do it in real time, but my videos get so long. We're going to decrease this row. We're going to knit 2 together 5 times. Knit 2, knit 2 together, 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 and it says the last 2 I must knit 2. Purl, this is my final decrease row. it says knit 3, knit 2 together, knit 3, knit 2 together, knit 2, knit 2 together, knit 3. That's how it's written, so I'll just do that. Knit 3. I guess I was trying to evenly space them. Knit 2 together, knit 3, 1, 2, 3, knit 2 together, knit 2, knit 2 together, and knit 3. Basically what one wants is a sharp decrease of stitches. Purl the row, and this is my final row. I'm going to make it as tight as possible, just so it can close up nice and tightly once the tail is in. I am going to, well, the mouse tail, I'm going to cut a long piece. It is about 30 centimeters long. Then I need to find myself a darning needle without a point, so it's not a chenille needle, it's a darning needle, and I put it on. Because I'm using sock needles, I can go to the other side. If you're not, you can either slip them off and then put it in. Like sometimes I slip them all off and I do it like that, but I don't have to because I just pushed them to the other side. So this is where the yarn is. I push it to the other side and I'm literally going to slip them onto the darning needle. Let me focus on that. Okay. I am not going to pull this closed tightly because that is where I'm going to stuff him. So I'm going to move this light. There we go. I have moved the light and hopefully it's going to be more overhead. Because I could see in the video there was a slight shadow on my hand. Sorry about that. To sew up the body, I'm not going to use a sharp needle, so I'm going to go for a darning and not a chenille. I sew him up from his nose, and I sew him up with the wrong sides together, the purl, the stocking. There's his little nose, remember? Now we can close it. Later on, a little black piece of black yarn is going to come through that. So, to sew him up, I basically make sure that he's nicely squashed together, folding out the little edges. So when I made lots of them, I would prepare them all like this. I have a little pile of them. And then with good lighting here, because I didn't need to have good lighting for the knitting. I mean, I have good lighting in the lounge, but not like this. This is office lighting. And then I would come out here and sew up. So you've got to see where your circle is, your magic circle. It's going in a counterclockwise direction. So I need to respect that. So my first stitch will be in a counterclockwise direction. There he is, that's all it needs. And then we go back. You can literally go above it and you pick up the little edge. You can now understand why when I was knitting that first stitch or two, I was using my finger to pull the yarn over. As I said, I didn't want to have all the tension being carried by the needles because they bend. And by using my finger to flick that yarn over, I could get a nice tight stitch. And this gives me a nice tight edge. If you want to, and if you know how, you can always embroider afterwards. You can embroider down the back of the mouse. If it's going to be a Christmas decoration and not for animals, you can add, or little children, you can add beads or anything you want to your little mouse. So if you have a bit of a scruffy seam here, you can hide it just by taking some colorful yarn or something different, and even a ribbon or something, and you can literally lace it in and out afterwards, or just stitch it on, whatever your imagination can come up with. And you can hide an unattractive seam and you can actually make it into a feature. You could make like little you know, like where the way your boot goes when you tie your shoelace up your boot, it zigzags across. You can use a colorful yarn and you can zigzag all the way up the back of the mouse. Afterwards, obviously you first want to close your seam, but afterwards. So it's it's not too short this, but maybe a little bit too short in the sense that I have to keep on re-threading him. But I'm too busy chatting, so I'm not concentrating as much as I should. Now be careful not to catch the magic loop yarn, otherwise you will not be able to close it. So I'm just going to leave it like that. Later on we work him away. I'm happy with that. I'm very, very happy with that seam. As I said, you can always add something there if you find that your seam is messy. He won't work that way around because of the design. He's actually designed to be like that. Okay, so now we have gone this far. I am going to stuff him and I'm going to close him, and in another video, because I don't know how long this one's going to be, I will crochet the ears and the tail and add them. But this video will definitely be the mouse's body. What we need is the stuffing. And you can add anything for a tail. You do not have to crochet a tail. If you don't know how to crochet, you can use a piece of ribbon or anything that you like. The ears, if you don't know how to crochet, you can knit ears. You probably will have to find out how to do that. My first mice that I made right in the beginning, I used a pattern from Battersea, Cats and Dogs Home, my very, very, very first pattern, and they show how you can knit a little ear and fold it over. They look more like rats than mice back then. That was a number of years ago. I think it was about 4 years ago. Okay, so I got my stuffing. I've pulled it again. Just like to over pull it. This is from Hobby Craft, so it's a good quality one. I'm happy with it. We are going to get the stuffing as far down as possible. And then I'm going to use the pencil. Just got to keep that magic circle out. It becomes a little bit bothersome, which it is. I'm just going to do that. That way he's a little bit closed. And now I use the rubber end of the pencil. Get in with my finger first. Need to add the rattle, so I'm going to go about 3/4 full. If you put the rattle in too soon, see if I can use the side of the pencil to get into his nose. No, if you put the rattle in too soon, he gets in the way of the ears when you want to sew them up. I do like to overstuff my mice. I like them to bounce. So I'm going to try and get the stuffing in as many of the little corners as possible. Stretch little mouse out. They do gobble up stuffing, these little guys. The tail will go in, but I can aim the tail down. So that's not a problem. The rattle is optional. Stuff them in there. It's nicely embedded. Got these back in the day, about 2018. I ordered them from China. Had a whole lot. They weren't very expensive. But now you'd probably have to try and find a UK. I live in the UK. So if you're in the UK, you might have to try and find a UK outlet, because otherwise it's going to take the slow boat from China. There we go. He's funny. They never two look the same. They're always different. It's the funniest thing about mice. Because I've stuffed him so much, his little nose is coming up. But I don't mind that. I don't mind that every mouse has character, different character. It's a little bit, you even out the stuffing a bit. Add a little bit more. Just so that you can see what a very stuffed mouse looks like. He's just had a little bit more to eat than his friend. Okay, that should do the trick. And then I pull this not all the way closed because I want the tail to go in there. Beautiful. So that's the end of this video, and section 2 will be crocheting some ears. I'm probably going to make them in the blue because of the video. Pink tends to... Anyway, so I'll do some blue ears in the next video and a tail, and then we will add that. So see you there, or if not, just add a piece of ribbon. But the video will show you how to pull it through. So, and also all these threads here make the whiskers. So the next video obviously will also have the eyes and the whiskers. So part 2. See you there. Thanks for watching. Bye now.